And welcome to the Sports Box, where the only opinion that matters is right here. I am Mike Galetta, a.k.a. Hamilton Mike, along with my partner Brian the Ranger Retard, bringing you another NFL special that you just love to keep watching about. Today we're off to the Pacific Northwest to talk about a team that's been in the Super Bowl a couple times, brought in, Wilson as a quarterback, and just has been lights out with defense. So let's talk to a guy who's originally from Spokane, Washington. His name is Tony Pacello. Tony, are you on the line?
Hey, everybody.
Attaboy. Attaboy. From the far west. Here we go. So, let's talk some Seahawks. Brian, stat me.
Seattle Seahawks. They went 10-6 last year, good enough for second place in the NFC West and a wild card berth. They did lose to Carolina in the divisional round, the eventual NFC champions. Offensively, they were a little one-sided. They were third on the ground and 20th through the air, but they were absolutely phenomenal defensively, and that's been the Seattle Seahawks calling card for a couple years now. Number one in the league against the run and second against the pass. Just fantastic. With the 31st overall pick, they went with Jermaine Ifedi, an offensive tackle from Texas A&M. They also added Chris Clemens and Brandon Browner through free agency, losing Bruce Irvin and Russell Okung, as well as beast mode Marshawn Lynch, who ended up retiring a little earlier, I think, than most people would have thought of.
But their skill sales.
They continue to be one of the NFL's elite teams, and really on both sides of the ball. They will miss Lynch, who retired this year, but they like what they've seen out of Thomas Rawls, and he'll be expected to be the lead back going into this season. Rookie Tyler Lockett was a bit of a surprise with his production as the wide receiver 2 opposite Doug Baldwin, and he'll be asked to take a bigger role on this year as well. They did lose to Carolina, who ended up going to the Super Bowl. Then they're going to be in a battle with Arizona for the NFC West, probably one of the very interesting storylines for the league this year. And they went with Jermaine Ifedi to help the offensive line after losing Okung to free agency. Could have a bit of a touch of Super Bowl hangover last year. We'll see if they have any case of that this year. So, Tony, they're one of the more impressive defenses I think we've seen in quite a while. Even last year when people felt it was a down year, statistically it definitely wasn't. Is that something you think they're going to be another calling card for them this year, just more of the same from the Seahawks?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the start of the season last year, they didn't have Cam Chancellor. The first two games, if you watched the tape of the St. Louis game, his replacement fell on the play that they won the game on. So, they started the season 0-2. They were 2-4 at one point, and if you watch the second half of the season, they really came together. And I think coming into this year, they don't have any distractions, no Michael Bennett contract issues, no Cam Chancellor issues. I know they lost to Irvin, but they got Frank Clark, who came into camp a lot lighter, and I think Frank Clark, I believe that's his name. I think defensively they're still going to be a top 3 unit in the league for sure.
So I'm gonna jump to the running back, as I'm interested in this question. I know you're out in Sacramento right now, but you're still keeping in touch with the Seattle area, and you're tied into the Seahawks. What's the temperature out there in Seattle about the retirement of Marshawn Lynch? Is it okay, see ya, not a big deal, or are people crushed about this?
I personally, I accepted it. I think really last year, he didn't really play at all. So, and we saw what Seattle was able to do. And even when he played, he wasn't really putting up the stats that he had previous years. We got Thomas Rawls. He looked great. He is coming off an ankle injury, which can always, be scary for a running back. But they did draft a couple running backs. They got Michael, who had went to Dallas and then got cut there, went to Washington, got cut there, and then they re-signed him at the end of last year when Rawls went down. And he came into camp, I guess, and looked really well. And in the first preseason game, I think he averaged about 5 yards a carry. So, I think they'll be all right. They still got Russell Wilson, who puts up, 500 to 800 yards on the ground as well every year.
Yeah, and that was my next question to you. Is we're talking a little bit about Russell Wilson. Now he obviously lost the year before. He lost Brandon Tate, which is kind of a big weapon. He's getting used to him. But
Golden Tate,
excuse me. Brandon Tate. Who the hell?
Brandon Tate's,
yeah.
He'll know what he's rated.
Hey, you know what? Never at Sports Box, never a dull moment here. Anyway, what receivers can we look for, Tony, that are really going to stand out this year? I mean, with obviously Jimmy Graham hopefully getting back on the field for them. What other receivers are they looking to are going to be in the spotlight this year?
Well, I think Lockett.
Right.
I mean, that kid, he's out of Kansas State. You know, he's just a great player. He set all sorts of records there. Came into the league, made the Pro Bowl as a kick returner, and then the second half of last season, you know, he was making a lot of big plays. Baldwin, I mean, he really stepped up last year. I don't know if he'll have the production he had at the second half of the season last year, but that was incredible. And then, like you said, Graham's coming back, so if they can find, you know, better ways to utilize him, I think the passing game is going to really step up a lot.
Yeah, it's a shame the injuries.
I think you're going to see. Yeah. You're still going to see him run a lot, but I do think they're going to definitely air it out more.
It's a shame the injuries. It seems like caught up to Jimmy Graham a little. Hopefully, he can get back on the field.
But even talking about Graham there, Tony. I mean, when he was traded, I mean, they gave up a lot to get him and bring him to Seattle. And he last year was a very high fantasy pick, as he normally is. And I think that people were really surprised to see just how little they used him. They weren't really throwing to him when he was healthy. I think they kind of started to, and then he ended up getting hurt. But, I mean, can we expect him to be a focal point of the game plan? Because, I mean, I got to tell you, people are just not expecting a lot from Jimmy Graham. With a guy of his talent, what a weapon to not be really using the right way.
Yeah, well, and, you know, I think a lot of that is the offensive coordinator. I'm not a big fan of Bevel at all. I think he doesn't know how to utilize his players. I think they ran into the same issue with Percy Harvin. I know he has an attitude, but when he plays, he's a great player, and there was a lot of games he played in that he didn't do anything, you know, and when they got rid of him. So I think a lot of it has to do with that. But, you know, if they can find a way to get him in there, I think maybe even line him up at wide receiver sometimes. Throw the ball up. I mean, the guy is huge. Yeah. You know, put it up in the air. He's 6'7". He played basketball. So he can out jump almost anybody in the league. I don't see why they wouldn't use him that way, but yeah, you know, that's the coach's decision.
I mean, in today's game, the tight end's becoming more and more prevalent. You know, you look at Rob Gronkowski out in New England. I mean, he's really the focal point of their offense. I don't know if I'm running Seattle's team, I'm trying to get Jimmy Graham the ball a lot more. That's a weapon I think that's just totally underutilized.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, look at Olsen in Carolina.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
Now you look at the defense. Obviously, Seattle made their mark with their defense, actually proving that you need a solid defense to win a Super Bowl. Nowadays, it's not just offense, and Seattle has a good mix. This defense, with what they've lost in free agency, are they just going to reload and be the same defense, or are they taking maybe a little bit of a step back this year on their defense?
No, I actually think they're going to be better than last year.
Wow.
You know, they had Kerry Williams last year, who was horrible. You know, he made it to where Richard Sherman had the ball as number one receiver, which I don't mind.
We know about Kerry Williams here in Philadelphia, so.
Their team worked for so long, you know. So, right. But yeah, there was that experience. Like I said, Cam Chancellor was out the first couple games. I think it took him another, 3 or 4 games really to get into the rhythm.
Sure.
You missed all the training camp, preseason. You know, you can't just walk onto the field and be in game shape. So
yeah, that's true.
And then, they drafted Jaron Reed, the kid from Alabama, who was the best run stopper in the draft. So, their running defense definitely is not going to take a step back. And I think the secondary is better. Like, they have Jeremy Lane, they brought Brandon Brown.
Okay.
Kind of like Maxwell, that he might not be the best individual player, but he can play well within that scheme. And I think bringing him in, laying some hard hits with Chancellor, I think it's going to be a scary defense this year. And then our linebacker, and I think Seattle has a really, they underestimate the linebacking crew. I mean, Bobby Wagner is right up there with Kuechly and Watt, but nobody ever talks about him. So.
We get lost in the shuffle and just an overall great unit. And, to your point, Byron Maxwell left for a big free agent contract for the Eagles, and I don't think the Seahawks missed a beat. I don't think they missed them at all second against the pass.
We know all about Maxwell here in Philadelphia, Tony.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As soon as he signed that deal, I said it was horrible, and everybody said, "Oh, you're just a bitter Seattle fan," and I knew. I'm like, Browner was doing the same thing that Maxwell was when he left. When you got help from Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor,
I said, you know what, Tony, it's funny. I said this.
It definitely makes you look better.
I said the exact same thing. Maxwell was a situation where he was in a solid defense. He was the man to get the money and was supposed to be the man, but he couldn't take over all that responsibility here in Philadelphia. Yep. And you know what? It's the same thing happening with Carolina when they let Josh Turner go. Because now,
Josh Norman.
Josh Norman. Never a dull moment here. Josh Norman. When he went to Washington, he was paid to be the man there. Now, I'm not saying he's not a good player, because he definitely is, but can he be the man to take over all the responsibilities and be that person? I don't know, and that's what I think Maxwell fell into, and that's why he's out of Philadelphia and now in Miami. So.
Oh yeah, well, all of Seattle's players, after they won the Super Bowl, people were overpaying for them.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then everybody's like, oh, we got so and so. It's like when Malcolm Smith left. They're like, oh, we got Malcolm Smith. Yeah, he had a great Super Bowl, but he was a backup.
Yep.
The whole season he was a backup. He played in certain schemes, but he wasn't a starter. And he went to Oakland, and took a bunch of money, and everybody said, oh, Seattle's defense is falling apart. But they reload. They're awesome in the draft. They find talent. Seattle, one thing about Pete Carroll is he'll take on some of those challenging players, and he's done a really good job of making them go down the straight and narrow. You don't see a lot of issues with Seattle players. Look at the 49ers.
Sure.
Like every other week they have somebody breaking the law.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the Seahawks is they're really becoming very New England-esque in that I think the sum of the parts is greater than the individuals. These guys go elsewhere and they just don't perform. That Seahawks defense is just pumping out wonderful results, and it's just a matter of next man up when a guy goes for the money.
Yeah, exactly, and they compete, and that's one thing you can tell with Pete Carroll is that he's going to pick the guy that competes the hardest and is the best. It's not about what we sign. They signed Matt Flynn to this 3-year contract for I think $20-something million to be the starter. He injured his shoulder. Russell Wilson came in his rookie year, said, hey, that kid's better. I'm going to play him. And Russell Wilson made what? That league minimum for, his first 4 years. What was he making? Like $500,000 a year? He won a Super Bowl. Meanwhile, Matt Flynn can play hardly any snaps and made $23 million. So, yeah, absolutely. They next man up.
So let's get into the schedule a little bit, Tony. Now I'm looking at a stretch for Seattle. Obviously they don't have an easy schedule with coming off the years that they have, but that's no surprise there. But the one part of the schedule.
I'm kind of losing you there, guys, a little bit.
Can you hear us okay?
Can you hear us okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. So I'm looking at part of the schedule, Tony, and like I said, Seattle doesn't have an easy schedule, which they shouldn't, because for the record that they've had the past couple of years. But I'm looking at the schedule where they start home against Buffalo. They're in New England to play the Patriots. They come back to Seattle, against Philadelphia, which should be a win. They go down to Tampa Bay, which should be a hell of a matchup. I don't know if they're going to win that game, but then they come home for Carolina, and then they go to Green Bay. So that's a stretch right there. You're talking 6 games where I think Seattle definitely got to come out of their 4-2 to stay the course of time and win that division.
I'm losing you guys again. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Can you hear us okay now? How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking about the schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, and I'll run through real quick. They're home for Buffalo. They're on the road for New England. They're home for Philadelphia, which should be a win. They're on their way to Tampa, which should be a loss. Then they're home against Carolina, and then they're in Green Bay. So that's a tough schedule. So out of those 6 games, do you agree they got to be at least 4-2 in that stretch to start pulling away in the division?
Yeah, that'd probably be a fair assessment. The one thing about Seattle, if you watched them the last 4 years, is they're a very strong second half of the season team.
Yeah.
I think the New England game, that's going to be a tough one. They're playing, like you said, Buffalo on Monday night, which is in Seattle. That should be a win. Seattle in prime time is a really hard place to play. I've been to games in Seattle in prime time in that stadium. It's loud. Then they have to travel to New England and play on Sunday night, so it's going to be a short week, and New England's coming off of a bye week on that game, so, that game, I wouldn't put money on Seattle on that one for sure. Yeah. I'm going to root for them to win, but it's going to be a tough one, but I think the rest of them, Green Bay, I think we have their numbers psychologically, after the big NFC Championship game, and getting the Hail Mary from Wilson to Tate.
Only if Matt Hasselbeck's not there.
Psychologically, that team,
Okay.
But you think? I think the game that's going to make or break this year for them is Week 16 hosting Arizona. I think that they're probably the 2 best teams in the NFC. Only one can win the division, and to have that game at home, I think, is a blessing because they're going to get that last game. They're very, very, very good at home. probably I would say would win that game, and that may be the difference in Seattle getting that division win in a home playoff game or having to go to maybe a team, like a Dallas or a team that may win another division as the 5 seed.
Oh, yeah, I agree. In fact, if that game's not on prime time, I'm sure that game will get moved to prime time. How they do that in the last 4 weeks or whatever. But I have a feeling you're right. That game could decide, and yeah, I'd like that in Seattle. But last year, Arizona beat Seattle in Seattle, and then Seattle came around and beat Arizona in Arizona. So
that's definitely a flex game. Yeah,
big time game.
So, well, that's all the time we have for the Seattle Seahawks today. I want to thank Tony for coming on the line today and talking to us about a little bit about Seattle. Tony, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, guys.
No problem. And we're going to throw him in the Magic Rolodex. That's right. We'll put Tony's name in the Magic Rolodex, and if we ever need any information of Seattle, thing going on in camp during the season, we'll give Tony a call and get Tony back on the air. Is that good a deal, Tony?
Sounds good to me.
Absolutely. Great. And again, thanks for watching the Sports Box. We got some good things coming.
Make sure you're following us across social media at Sportsbox Show on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. And most importantly, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you get the fresh, hot off the press content with guys like Tony.
For the love of God, subscribe, for crying out loud. Wait, come on. Tony, subscribe and let's go.
It's free with a money-back guarantee, right?
That's right.
What do you got to lose?
That's right, because that's the Sports Box. The only opinion that matters is still right here. Thanks for watching, folks. See ya.
Don't forget to subscribe.